A new era of college football is upon us, and thus, a new era of Oregon football is upon us with the ratification and the implementation of the House versus NCAA Settlement. But how exactly does this affect the Ducks? With Evan Stewart out of the wide receiver picture due to injury, another veteran is poised to play a pivotal role for the Ducks this season. Plus, another big official visit weekend on campus in Eugene. This and a whole lot more as we fly down the I-5 on this edition of That Show Out West.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy wallawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
Welcome, everybody, to That Show Out West for That Team Out West. I'm Ted LaRue. You know, we are far enough into the 2025 calendar that I think it is time to start each and every single show with a little bit of a countdown clock. Going to start with maybe one countdown that's not as important, and certainly the second countdown is maybe the most important one of them all. In 54 days, I am going to be crossing the Columbia River into the state of Oregon for the very first time. I could not be more excited about that. And then 80 days from today, Autzen Stadium is going to be rocking as the Montana State Bobcats come into Eugene to open up the 2025 season. Now, although we are excited about those things, although we cannot wait for those things to happen, you know what we don't do on this show? We do not wish away summer. Summer is a beautiful time of year. Summer is a very special time of year for yours truly. So enjoy it, cherish it. Football season will be there, but certainly the anticipation remains high. You know, something else that has been very, very highly anticipated has been when we were going to get the judges' pen to paper on this House versus NCAA settlement and when that was going to be approved so we could really just move on with our lives and really move forward in this next stage of college athletics and college football. And that's exactly what we got last season. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there. There's people with big platforms. There's people with regional media outlets, national media outlets. And then there's, you know, people on the Twitter sphere and everywhere in between. A lot of people out there are saying, well, oh, this settlement is going to be really good for this team, or it's going to be really good for this group of teams. Or they're saying, oh, it's not going to be as good for this team, or it's really going to hurt this group of teams. And to be honest with you, it's foolish. It's foolish, really, for a couple of reasons to say something like that. And everybody kind of prognosticating it because, number one, we don't even know. There's still a lot of details to be figured out in this current structure right here and right now. Like, in the next coming months, we're going to figure some more stuff out. So we don't even know what this entire thing is going to look like by the time that this football season kicks off in late August and early September. That's number one. And number two, the only constant is change, man. Like, what this structure looks like, you know, and if you've certainly been following this story, you know everything from the rev share to the NIL clearinghouse to the roster limits to the College Sports Commission. Like, you know all of those things. You know all of those bullet points right now. But I think what this looks like right now in June of 2025, it will not look the same. It will not look the same, man, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, certainly not 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now. So really, to really gaze into the future and predict, well, it's not going to be good for this team. And there's been some people out there that are saying, I don't know, this House settlement may be not good for a team out west. Oh, that team out west in the Oregon Ducks. I just, first of all, I don't know if I agree with that. I'm going to get into some of those points as this segment certainly progresses, but really to be able to future cast like that, it's irresponsible, it's foolish, it's not the smartest thing in the world. That's just how I personally see things, because how can you futurecast? How can you really look forward into the future when you don't really even know what the present is? Much less the future. So I'll kind of get off my soapbox, certainly on that right now. But we know everything that's kind of go on with this house settlement. 13 to $15 million in rev sharing. We know about roster limits. We know about NIL Go and the clearinghouse. I want to talk about the NIL clearinghouse right now, because that is the big lightning rod for future possible change within college sports and college football. And that is the lightning rod for people's comments surrounding maybe this house settlement isn't the most favorable to the Oregon Ducks right now. Basically, NIL Go, if you have an NIL deal over $600, it has to be approved through this NIL clearinghouse to make sure it is an actual NIL deal, and all of those things to make sure that it really checks out. First of all, I'm not sure how legal that's going to be, certainly going forward. Like, as soon as you have a high-profile player not able to earn as much as he or she wants to earn, that's when you are going to see people, and lawyers already might be drafting their lawsuits against this NIL clearinghouse. But certainly as soon as that type of high-profile situation happens, then you're going to see this NIL clearinghouse certainly under fire as well. Now, one thing people have pointed to where it's like, oh, maybe this is going to hurt Oregon a little bit, is some of these bullet points that have to do with this clearinghouse and some of the data points that they are going to look to, whether they see an NIL deal is of the fair value and it is a legitimate value as well. A lot of people point towards the market size, right? The amount of money that a player is getting compared to maybe the market size that they are in. But that is just one bullet point. People focus on that because Eugene, Oregon certainly isn't the biggest market in the world. Like, you've got other schools on the West Coast like Los Angeles and Seattle that say, hey, maybe those schools can really take advantage of that part as well. But there's more than just one bullet point that Deloitte really considers when these NIL deals are going through this clearinghouse as well. Social media following and the size and really brand power, for lack of a better term, is also factored in with this as well. What do we know about Oregon? It's a national brand. It's a national brand. It carries national power. People know the Ducks from sea to shining sea, right? And when you talk about social media following, Oregon has a huge social media following, maybe compared to some other schools, certainly regionally and also across the country as well. And that's why, it's more than just the money. That's why the Oregon brand is so valuable. People talk about the word brand. They talk about it so much, and there are so many things that encompass brand. And Oregon's is really nationwide. Why do you think you have a guy from the Midwest talking about the Oregon Ducks on a weekly basis and certainly interested in that, right? So that's, I think, going to play a lot of power as well. So just because Oregon is in a smaller market, and although that is a bullet point, there are many other bullet points, I think, that have to be factored in why Oregon is still going to be in a great position where they're going to have fair and equitable deals, and they're still going to be able to succeed within this new NIL environment. Oh, and then when we talk about bullet points, there's maybe, let's read the fine print a little bit. Deals from publicly traded companies will be looked on very favorably, because what this NIL clearinghouse, really among other things, but one thing that they're really trying to focus in on is these are legitimate NIL deals, and it's not a booster just going through and using NIL as a guise saying, hey, here's $3 million, come play for us. I think the clearinghouse wants a true exchange of services, and they want reputable companies to be represented. This, according to Deloitte, 90% of existing NIL contracts with publicly traded companies would have been approved. More than 70% of deals with booster collectives would have been denied. Oh, when we talk about publicly traded companies, does the state of Oregon, I don't know, do they have a significant publicly traded company of any kind? Anybody? Hey, who's this Phil Knight guy that I hear about all the time? Yeah, Nike. Nike has given Oregon an advantage, let's call it as it is, for 20 plus years. And I think in this environment and what I've just been talking about, I think Nike is going to continue to give Oregon an advantage because of their publicly traded status and how that is going to be looked on a little bit more favorably here within this NIL clearinghouse as well. So if you want to ask me, is Oregon going to rise? Is Oregon going to fall because of this? Well, first of all, like I said before, I don't really see that a lot of teams are going to significantly get shot out of a rocket, or other teams are going to significantly find themselves at the bottom of a canyon. But here's what I will say. Oregon's going to be just fine, man. Oregon right now sits as top 7, top 6, top 5 type of program in college football. They're going to stay there. I don't think this House settlement and the effects of it, I don't think it really affects anything. But let's just live, okay? I'm going to indulge some people. Let's live in a little bit of a fantasy land for a moment. Let's live in a world where you have this rev share. Everybody can spend on average of $14 million. Okay, let's say that this NIL clearinghouse, even though I just laid out reasons why this is maybe not the case and Oregon is still going to be able to spend a lot of money on the NIL front and they're going to be just fine. But let's just pretend for just a moment that everybody's on a level playing field, that the clearinghouse maybe brings down the big spenders and the NIL spending from a school like a Minnesota is similar to a school like Oregon. Okay, if everybody is on a level playing field like it was perceived to be, maybe in the previous era from NIL, where everybody was just getting scholarships, what then becomes the big selling points for top recruits? Which programs win? Which programs win a lot? Which programs are on the big stage? Which programs produce the most NFL draft picks? Okay, how about we tackle a couple of things as it pertains to these Ducks, right? Let's talk about winning. Dan Lanning has done a whole lot of winning since he stepped on campus. Oregon as a whole, like the last 20 or so years, has done a whole lot of winning. And then you look at the NFL draft development, right? Oregon just produced a record high amount of draft picks in this latest draft. The draft before that was also a record amount of Ducks drafted. So they broke their own record from the previous year. They are producing NFL talent, whether it's guys that were recruited by Dan Lanning and are developed out of high school, or it's guys that come in as transfers, see the opportunity that Oregon provides to be on the big stage, to play in big games, to really elevate their draft status, whatever it is. Even if the playing field is totally level, Oregon is still going to be in a position, folks, to get high-end talent out of the transfer portal in high school recruiting. So, I try to look at this in many different ways and how it's all going to go down, and I kind of still see the same thing happening, where Oregon is still going to be in a really good position. You got to give a lot of credit to Dan Lanning for really establishing the program and what he's been able to do, and he's proved himself to be an excellent recruiter. And this program, him and Marshall, have proved to be a program that has adapted very well. They adapted from moving from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten pretty well, didn't they? Coming into the Big Ten and winning the conference in their very first year as well. They did a phenomenal job adapting to the, I know he came in 2022, and the NIL and transfer portal was certainly a thing at that time. But as the rules have certainly changed, and maybe the rules have loosened up and it's become more of the Wild West, this is a staff that has been able to adapt really well with the changes. So why wouldn't they be able to adapt with this type of change in the right here and the right now? The last thing I'll say, the only constant is change. Okay? I said at the beginning, this is going to change. I would be very surprised if, I'll say 3 years down the road, if this NIL clearinghouse is unchanged. And I think that's being generous. I think you could see 1 year down the road. You could see 2 years down the road that this is going to remain unchanged. So this staff is going to have to stay on their tiptoes. This staff is going to have to stay ready because, man, if you thought there was a lot of change before, I think there's going to be a whole lot of change certainly down the road because once you get lawsuits against this NIL Go and this NIL clearinghouse, that's when collective bargaining, possible employment, contracts really come into play. But I got a lot of confidence that the Ducks are going to be able to. They were successful in the era before NIL and portal. They were successful in the NIL and portal era, and I think they're going to be successful certainly going into the revenue sharing model as well. You know, the injury to Evan Stewart has brought up a lot of questions, and I think a lot of people are trying to look for quick answers. They're trying to look for quick solutions on what this Oregon wide receiver room is going to look like. Who is going to step up? I talked about it on Friday's edition of TSOW, who are maybe some contenders I think could possibly step up in the absence of Oregon's leading receiver that was slated to come back for the 2025 season. I talked about Jurion Dickey. Maybe it's time for him to finally realize his 5-star potential, put some of the issues certainly behind him with a new voice leading the wide receiver room in wide receivers coach Ross Douglas. Jeremiah McClellan is another guy that's been talked about a lot. Transfer Malik Benson. Maybe Oregon is the place for him to get his feet on the ground and have a really, really productive season after formerly being the number 1 JUCO recruit in the country at one point in time. But what's the thing about Evan Stewart? And what's the thing about maybe the rest of the wide receiver room that maybe Stu was able to carry with them that I think a lot of maybe the room doesn't have? The veteran experience. Okay, Evan Stewart played 2 years at Texas A&M. He played the last year at Oregon. He played 3 years of Power 2 football and 3 years of very productive Power 2 football. That veteran presence means something. And Oregon, with a lot of young guys, I mentioned some of them, even DeCorian Moore, for as talented as DeCorian Moore is out there, he's still a young guy. He's still a true freshman. I think Evan Stewart was the ultra-talented, experienced option. And I really, when I take time to sit back, when I take time to really think about it and digest it a little bit, the more another veteran maybe seems to come to the forefront, and that being Gary Bryant Jr. I think there's many reasons why he is poised to have a very pivotal role, and I believe an increased role in this Oregon offense now as a result of the injury of Evan Stewart. Let's talk first about that veteran presence, and maybe Gary Bryant Jr. was going to be the veteran presence anyway, whether Evan Stewart was there or not, right? He's played a lot of college football. He's kind of dealt through some injuries, certainly, in his time. But, you know, when you have a team as young as Oregon and when you have really these really talented guys, specifically in the wide receiver room, that are looking to make an impact, right? Guys that are really looking to burst onto the scene. I mentioned some of them already, but, you know, you throw in a Kyler Casper. You throw in some of these other really young guys. Maybe a true freshman in Cooper Perry is going to make an impact. Maybe a redshirt freshman in Dylan Gresham is going to be able to make an impact. They need someone to kind of look up to. How hard do you need to practice? What do you need to do in your reps within practice? What do you need to do within because it's not just between the lines within the game, right? It's also in the film room. It's also all of the things that go into really being a professional. And I think Gary Bryant Jr., and he talked about it during the spring, about his lead by example mentality. And I think that this lead by example mentality is going to play a pivotal role in the development of Oregon's wide receiver room this season.
I'm not really a big vocal guy myself. I'm really a lead by example guy. So when I come out and work every day, I think the guys see that. So this is my 3rd year here in the program. And as years go on, you get more comfortable being able to speak to certain guys and stuff like that. And they see the way that I work every day. So they're like, man, this guy, we can depend on this guy. So everything I say, they kind of listen to and take a toll to that. just from them, they know me. Like, if I say something, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I'm not willing to do. So I think that's the biggest thing.
Like, you need a guy that just, like, on 3rd and 5, he knows, he's seen so many defenses throughout his career. He knows exactly which part of the zone to be able to pick. He knows, like, where he has to go to get that 6 yards, to get that 7 yards, to get that 8 yards, to certainly keep the chains moving in the right direction. And here's the thing about his veteran presence. We've seen him produce before. He had a really good season in 2021, I believe it was, over at USC before he transferred to Oregon. I believe that's his best season as a college player so far, but we've seen it here in Eugene in 2023. 30 catches, 442 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So, like, in a room now with a lot of uncertainty where your best option, pretty damn good option, but still your best option is a true freshman, and there's a lot of guys that don't have a lot of experience, I think one thing you want to look to is, I want something that's proven. I want a proof of concept. I want somebody that I can rely on. And if Gary does remain healthy, I think he's the guy that you can constantly go to. That's what Bo Nix did in 2023, and we really saw that type of production for Gary Bryant Jr. So he's a guy that can lead by example on the practice field, on the film room like we talked about as well, and he's a guy that you can rely on. He's a guy that's seen a lot of defenses. I think Gary Bryant on the field is going to be a big part of this wide receiver room and this passing attack going forward for Oregon. And you got a young quarterback. Like, as a young quarterback, you want to be able to look, you want to be able to rely, you want to be able to lean on a guy. You know, I know the tight end, right, is a lot that safety valve that quarterbacks look to, but, you know, a guy like Gary Bryant Jr. working out of the slot is also someone that you want to be able to rely on, also someone that you want to be able to lean on. And now that, like I think, you know, maybe I didn't have my projected depth chart this way. I was kind of going back and forth on a lot of things, but I thought Decorian Moore out wide, and then Evan Stewart, and a lot of other people have said this as well, but Evan Stewart with his skill set a lot more comfortable working out of the slot, maybe reprising that Tez Johnson role. Now without Evan Stewart, where do you go for the slot receiver? Gary Bryant Jr.'s skill set really blends extremely well into working out of the slot as well. I was kind of watching some film from the 2023 season, and for better or for worse, we know how much that those smoke screens, those pop screens, we know that Will Stein really wants to incorporate into that offense. And I saw a lot of it with Gary Bryant Jr., where he was able to catch the ball, and even if it was just catching it, getting 6 or 7 yards up the field, like, people really underestimate the 6 to 7 yard short passing play. Really, people underestimate that type of play and how big that can be in continuing to move your momentum down the field, creating those chunk positive plays down the field. But I also saw some plays where Gary just gets the ball, and if you get his speed in space, now I know he's dealt with through some injuries. I know that maybe he isn't quite the track star that he maybe used to be earlier in his career, but when you get him the ball out in space, he can certainly create. He can certainly take advantage of all of the speed and the quickness that he still has. Like, everybody's going to look back to that where they just couldn't bring him down a couple of years ago at Arizona State, and he just kept on going for 70 plus yards on his way into the end zone. Like, I think your other best options in terms of like a true slot receiver, Justice Lowe, I think is another guy that's also slated to really get an increased role and increased looks in this offense this year. Dylan Gresham's a redshirt freshman. I think he could be really good, but once again, you want to go back to the proven commodity in maybe a room that has a little bit more uncertainty. Without somebody like Evan Stewart, you want something that you know works. You want to go back to the well of something that you've seen before. Will Stein and Dan Lanning have seen it before, certainly in Gary Bryant Jr. With Decorian Moore on the outside, with Kenyon Sadiq also. Like, I'm not saying that Gary Bryant Jr. has to be a 1,000-yard receiver. If, like, what would we say before, 442 yards in 2023? If he gets like 500 yards or 600 yards, he just takes a little bit of a step up, and he does the job off the game field, so to speak, in really getting these younger receivers and elevating them and showing them exactly what it means to be a great Oregon wide receiver and be a high-level Big Ten wide receiver, that's the pivotal role that you're looking for this veteran to play in his last year in an Oregon Duck uniform. You know, I've noticed a lot of people nationally maybe aren't talking about Oregon as much as they, probably should be talking about Oregon, but I think a lot of people are keeping the Ducks maybe at a little bit of distance in terms of really predicting them to accomplish great things this year because of the inexperience, because of the youth, because of kind of the unpredictability surrounding this Oregon team. Now, you and I know exactly how talented that these young players are, but I think when you have some of this unpredictability, people start and kind of turn and they think, what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? And I think there's even within the Oregon Duck fan base and outside of the Oregon Duck fan base, people that are looking in at this Quack Attack program, I think there's a lot of what ifs. Now, I've boiled it down to 4 what ifs. I'm not saying like these are the top what ifs, need to know the answers in these, but these are certainly some that came to mind, and I'm going to break down what if this happens, what could be some of the results. How about we dive into it and talk about the offense? Because Dante Moore, Decorian Moore, Kenyon Sadiq, when people talk about the ceilings of each and every one of single these players, All-American, 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 and I'm not saying Decorian Moore is going to be an All-American this year, but I'm talking about like the ceilings in their careers. But even if we're talking about the ceilings of each and every single one of these 3 players in 2025, what if that happens? What if Dante Moore is just absolutely slinging it, and it was very clear that last year he got all of that UCLA. He very clearly de-chipped and de-UCLA'd himself, and he was under the learning tree of Dylan Gabriel and Will Stein, and he did a great job, and his talent is what it looked like on his high school film. What if Decorian Moore is the truth? What if Decorian Moore is somewhere between like a Ryan Williams and a Jeremiah Smith, a 900-yard receiver, a 1,000-yard receiver, and a true threat like Oregon has never seen at the wide receiver position? What if Kenyon Sadiq is one of the best tight ends in college football? Let's break it all down because, man, if those 3 guys are playing at that type of level, and if they are all living up to the hype. We've heard about the hype with Decorian Moore. We've heard Decorian Moore say Dante Moore is going to win the Heisman Trophy. We've heard Tez Johnson at the Rose Bowl media availability say Dante Moore is going to be a Heisman finalist, the 3rd consecutive one for the Oregon Ducks. And PFF has Kenyon Sadiq as a top 6 tight end in all of college football. If the cream rises to the top, this will be a top 5 offense in college football, and that might even be a minimum, especially due with the injury to Evan Stewart, right? The importance, especially of Decorian Moore and Kenyon Sadiq, to just raise their game up just a little bit more to make up for that is even more ultra important. And if those guys are playing at the top of their game and they are living up to the hype, I think that it certainly adds another dimension to the Oregon offense. We've talked about this before, because if Decorian Moore and his ability and his speed to get over the top and pop off the top of the defense, and then combined with the arm strength of Dante Moore, I think if these guys are living up to the hype, I think the deep ball is unleashed down the field. Like, the deep ball being unleashed down the field has so many other more sub-effects to it, because if Decorian is working as a true number 1 and it is insanely tough to guard him on the outside, I think that opens up the middle. And when we talk about the middle of the field, we talk about the tight end Kenyon Sadiq. because now if you have to dedicate more resources, you have to move over a safety to try to get a second guy into Corey and Moore. That opens up more room in the middle of the defense for maybe your best weapon. And that was a hill that I was willing to die on, that Kenyon Sadiq was the best weapon for Oregon football this upcoming season as well. So if all three of these guys are playing at their top level, if all three of these guys are living up to the hype, this is a absolute machine on the offensive side of the ball. And then it opens up the run game. It opens up the run game certainly as well, where for as the passing game and what they're doing down the field and how prolific that they are, certainly going down the field. And now you have those advantages in the box. When Oregon has the numbers, they can go hat on a hat with some of these big offensive linemen, certainly up front, blocking down the field. If these three are playing at the top of their game, I think that there are very few defenses that can really hold Oregon in check during the season. Penn State is certainly one of them. If all three of these guys are playing at their top level, Oregon can win every single game for the second consecutive season. Can you tell I'm excited about these three guys? And can you tell I'm excited about what the possibility of what Oregon football could be if all three of these players are playing at the level that we know that they are all capable of? I could probably talk about this forever and ever and ever, but let's move on to the next what if. Let's go to defense, because this one's fun. You guys know how optimistic and how much I believe in the Oregon defensive line and how deep that I believe that the Duck defensive line is. What if Bear Alexander produces at an all Big Ten level? Stop. I'm not talking about first team all Big Ten, okay? When I look at first team all Big Ten on the Oregon defensive line, I think Mateo Uiagalelei, I forgot exactly which group it was, but he was voted first team all Big Ten by somebody last year. Amari Washington, I also think has potential to be a first team all Big Ten player. Like, those are the players I'm thinking of. When I talk all Big Ten with Bear Alexander, I'm talking about second team all Big Ten, third team all Big Ten. I'm talking about a really good player. I'm talking about he's better than good, but is he great? Is he elite? Maybe he will be, maybe he won't. But I'm talking about being a really good player up front on the defensive line. That's what I really mean by an all Big Ten level. It's kind of a broad range, certainly, as well. Because if that happens, this defensive line truly becomes a pick your poison. This is a defensive line where if Bear Alexander is playing at this type of level, if you double team one guy will come free, and that guy will wreak havoc, and that guy will get a sack, and that guy will get a tackle for loss. If Bear Alexander is playing at the level that I think we know that he truly can play, if he is truly on the right track, if Tony Tuioti and Tosh Lupoi really get him kind of going in that direction, this defensive line does not have a weakness. This defensive line, I already probably think it is that way. In fact, I already know it is that way, but it really is the strength of this defense. If Bear Alexander is playing at a all Big Ten level, I think there's a good chance that you could have three all-conference defensive linemen certainly up front as well. If Bear Alexander is playing at an all Big Ten level, there's a little bit less pressure on the secondary as well. I talked about, hey, if you double team a guy, one of these guys is certainly guaranteed to be able to come free. And we'll talk about the secondary here in just a minute in another what if, but if this defensive line is constantly getting pressure and constantly getting pressure and constantly getting pressure, and Bear Alexander is a big part of that, that quickens the timing that the quarterback has to be able to look down the field. It quickens the routes. Thus, these young defensive backs don't have to cover as long, and there's not as much pressure certainly put on them. Like, the pass rush and the defensive line is an extremely big key, I honestly believe, because of that as well. if Bear Alexander is playing at this type of level, it creates less urgency for maybe guys that are a little bit more unproven. I know Terrence Green certainly played a little bit last year, but he certainly wasn't in a starting role. Terrence Green, Tion Gray, Aiden Breland. Because if things just, man, for whatever reason, if they just don't work, if they just don't work out with Bear Alexander, and now you got to put, one of these guys could be really, really good. Okay, let's just put it out there. Like the depth is that strong, I think, for Oregon, but we've seen Bear play good football before. I mean, he's played at Georgia. He's played at USC. Like, he is an experienced option up front on the defensive line. Some of these guys aren't as experienced as well. So maybe, who knows? One or two of these guys could be really, really good. One or two of these guys could be better than Bear Alexander. Maybe as well, but they're a little bit unproven, where I think you've seen it on film before what Bear can really be up front on the defensive line as well. And I think one other thing to really think about is if Bear is playing at an all-conference level. Like, let's look at the defensive line rotation last season, where you had Jamari Caldwell, you had Derek Harmon, you had Jordan Birch, you had Mateo Uiagalelei. Like, you had those types of guys. Like, what was the defensive line rotation? They got to Amari Washington. I think Terrence Green, like I said, played a good amount of games last season. And, when you talk about the significant rotation, beyond that, there wasn't a lot of guys that maybe played in a lot of significant playing time. Yes, they certainly played here and there, but I'm talking about guys that really played a good amount and this defense really relied on in the rotation. I think if Bear Alexander is playing at an all-conference type of level that we talked about, Green, Gray, or Breland, one of those guys probably might not play very much. I think that's the fact of the matter. Now, maybe there is going to be, they realize the talent that's there, and maybe because I remember Tony Tuioti said in the spring, it's like, dude, these guys were ready. Green and Gray were ready. It's just they had some dudes in front of them. But what if Bear Alexander is that dude? One of these guys may not see a ton of playing time. So that's something to really keep an eye on. I remember Chip Kelly said in an interview with Joel Klatt a couple of years ago, there's no crying on the yacht, and this is certainly a yacht problem. It is a good problem to have if you're the Oregon Ducks when you have this type of talent up front of the defensive line. Man, I get excited about the offensive firepower. I get excited about the defensive line. Running out of breath, running out of excitement here in the segment. We got two more to go. What if the run game, so this kind of goes up against our first point. What if the run game is the best part of Oregon's offense? Now, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. I think that this is very broad, but the first thing that I want to say is if the run game is the best part of Oregon's offense, it means these three transfer offensive linemen are eating up front. It tells me that these transfer offensive linemen have gelled together, and this is just a mashing unit up front. And that's extremely, extremely encouraging. And if it tells me the run game is the best part of Oregon's offense, meaning they probably produce more yards and certainly get more carries and all of that sort of stuff, it maybe tells me that the injury to Evan Stewart was maybe a bigger deal than anticipated. Maybe it tells me that some of these younger guys maybe haven't stepped up like we were really expecting them to. So Oregon really has to lean on the run game and then use kind of the pass game kind of coming off of that as well. Do I think that is going to happen? That last part that I talked about, the passing game. No, I think the passing game is still going to be pretty damn good. I think there's going to be guys that are going to step up into roles by the time we get to the middle of the season, by the time we get to the later of the season, by the time it truly matters in the month of November. But I do get really excited about the possibility of the run game eating. I think if the run game is the best part of the Oregon offense, it also tells me that it's not just Mekhi Hughes, but it's also Noah Whittington is having his best season as a back in the backfield, and they are maybe working towards not one, but maybe two 1,000-yard rushers. It could be Whittington and Hughes. It tells me Dink Riggs has taken a pretty drastic step forward like maybe we anticipated. It tells me that there is a lot of really good depth in the running back room. I think it also could tell me if this is the best part of Oregon's offense, Mekhi Hughes could maybe be in a guy that could be in the Heisman Trophy type of conversation as well. That's not really being talked about. But if this offense is pounding the rock, if they're running the ball like they are in this what-if scenario, and if Oregon is winning football games, yeah, you might have to put him into that type of conversation. Let's talk about our last what if. And this is maybe, all of those have been positive. I'm a positive guy, but I think we have to look at this last one. What if the Ducks secondary is just too young? What if there's just too much inexperience? Now, we know the transfers that have come in, all slated to be last year guys. I know Dylan Thieneman could technically come back for one more year in 2026, but Jaden Kennedy, Dylan Thieneman, and Theron Johnson. But what if the rest of the secondary is just too young? Projected starters right now, redshirt freshman Ife Obadegwu at one corner. Projected starter, or redshirt freshman at safety, Kingston Lopa. And then you have a lot of these other. We know about the talent. We also know about the youth and inexperience back there in the secondary. If the secondary just is too young, it probably means they're missing assignments. It probably means that deep balls and big plays are being made over the top of them. It puts a lot more pressure. We talked about the complementary relationship between the defensive line and the pass rush and the secondary. If the secondary is just too young, if they maybe can't hold their coverage as long, maybe they're getting missed assignments and things like that, it puts a lot more pressure on the defensive line to get home more consistently. Can they do it? We'll see, but it certainly puts a lot more pressure on them to do so if the back end certainly doesn't help them out, because we talk about that complementary relationship. If the coverage can hold for 2.5 or 3 seconds, that gives more time for the pass rush to also get there on the back end as well. It makes late season games against West Coast passing teams like USC, and we know about their good wide receiver combination in Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane, and the Washington with Damon Williams certainly on the road, and Denzel Boston coming back. It makes those games, I think, a little bit more tricky, maybe even a little bit more dangerous towards the end of the season. Like when I look at the schedule prior to that USC game, prior to that Washington game, I don't think there's a ton of passing offenses that are going to scare you, right? So if this defense is just too young, I think it's going to be late in the season when that could possibly be exposed. I believe that there are enough veterans in this secondary. Jaleel Florence has been around for a while. We talked about Thieneman. We talked about Johnson. We talked about Kennedy. I think there's enough veterans in this room to be able to figure this thing out. But here's the thing about the veterans. You've got 2 all Big Ten guys, Dylan Thieneman and Theron Johnson. This is their first year in the program. We talk about the quarterback of the defense being Dylan Thieneman. There's a lot of pressure on him to figure out a brand new defensive scheme and really a new way to play the safety position in Tosh Lupoi's system. And now, 1, to be able to learn that, and 2, now to be able to teach some of these younger guys where they have to be at certain points in time. So there's a possibility that there could be just too much freshness, too much newness back there in the secondary. But there could also be the possibility that these guys are just way more talented than some of the other transfers that they've brought in as well. That's the beauty of uncertainty. That's the beauty that surrounds this Oregon team in 2025. Those are my 4 what-ifs for Oregon football this season. All right, guys, it's time to get in our covered wagons. It is time to get in our stagecoaches. It is time to head down the Oregon recruiting trail. Usually we start the show with recruiting. We are going to end the show with recruiting here today. And before we look forward to this weekend of official visits, man, you got to look back. Oh, boy. This last weekend was chock full of 5-star defensive talent. Some pretty good offensive talent on there as well, but it was really all about the defensive side of the ball. How about that photo of Brandon Arrington, Jet Washington, and Joey O'Brien? More length in that photo than some flying death machines from the Cretaceous period in there. I just love the way that the secondary is going, like college version of the Legion of Boom. Anybody? We know what happened last year with those 4 top 75 guys. And then, if you can land 2 of those guys from last weekend, Brandon Arrington, you can land Jet Washington, boy, you're getting into dangerous territory of what that secondary could truly be in a couple of seasons, man. Chris Hampton is doing a phenomenal job. He was 24/7 Sports Recruiter of the Year last year. Tosh Lapoy, Dan Lanning, this is a defensive staff. They know the traits that they are looking forward to, but man, having that type of length on defense, baby, that is some good stuff that gets me really excited. One last thing to kind of wrap up last weekend as well, Tyler Atkinson, number 1 linebacker, 5-star from the state of Georgia. Everybody's saying it's going to be a tough pull. Going to be a tough pull to get that type of defender out of Kirby Smart's backyards. And yes, I agree, and I've said that before, but Dan Lanning is taking the point on this recruitment. Tyler Atkinson confirming Dan Lanning is the point guard in this recruitment. He is the main contact. Tyler Atkinson very invested in his personal brand, and we know, does anybody do brand maybe better than the Oregon Ducks? We know that they've been investing a lot into that. There was an unofficial visit and now an official visit a couple of times here in the last couple of months that Tyler Atkinson was on campus in Eugene. Every cycle, Dan Lanning always seems to make one big, bold, upset type of move, type of commitment, type of signee. Maybe it's Tyler Atkinson in 2026. Maybe that is the guy. That'll be as high profile as a linebacker that they've gotten in the Dan Lanning era. Man, that would be something. And that really kind of ties into maybe some things that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later on. But I don't know. I just got a gut feeling with Dan taking over in this recruitment and making it an extreme priority. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying I think Oregon I think they're in a really good spot for Tyler Atkinson. That's the way I feel. But I challenge anybody to say that they had a bad official visit. Everybody's always positive coming off of their own official visits. But let's advance to this weekend. Now, before we talk about the storylines about June 13th, before we talk about the storylines of this upcoming recruiting weekend, we got to talk about a guy that's going to be there on campus this weekend, and we got to talk about a guy that's going to be committing on Friday. So first off, before I name said player, because we are going to make a commitment prediction here, we're 1 for 2 on commitment predictions. Got the recommitment of Jared Curtis correct. Caden Dixon Wyatt, I was not correct. I thought he'd come to Oregon. He went to Ohio State. But before you name names, if you've got a guy that's slated to commit on a Friday and slated to show up at Oregon on Friday night or on Saturday, that alone, without telling you who the player is, should give you a pretty damn good feeling that that player is going to be a Duck. Okay? If he commits somewhere else when it comes to Oregon, boy, would that be ass backwards. It's Messiah Hampton, the 4-star wide receiver out of the state of New York. Relationships are huge in recruiting. Relationships are huge in college football. Ross Douglas was recruiting this guy when he was the wide receivers coach and passing game coordinator at Syracuse. And now ever since Ross Douglas has come over to Oregon, Messiah Hampton was Ross Douglas's first offer. That has been a relationship that has continued to grow and continue to grow and continue to grow. Now, Fran Brown in Syracuse, I think they're still fighting. They're still clawing. Ohio State and Penn State are some other top-tier schools that are a little bit more local that are certainly trying to get in this recruitment as well. Messiah Hampton recently trimmed it down to a top 7. But this is, and I've talked about this. I talked about it last week when Kelvin Russell was on campus. Now we're really going to find out the recruiting chops of Ross Douglas, because I think we know what he can do from a development standpoint. We saw what happened last year with that deep crop of wide receivers, top passing offense in the country last year in upstate New York. But before that, it was just 1 year in college. Before that, he was in the NFL. So we haven't really seen what he can do on the recruiting trail. He seals the deal here. That'll certainly give me a lot of confidence going forward. What's my prediction on Messiah Hampton? Relationships are huge. I think this ongoing long relationship with Ross Douglas, I think, is gigantic. I think Oregon, ever since really the decision of Caden Dixon Wyatt, has put Messiah Hampton really at a top level in terms of priority at the wide receiver position. I think when Messiah Hampton comes onto campus this weekend, I think he's going to be a Duck. I think he's going to be coming around and he's going to be saying, you know how great it is to be an Oregon Duck? It is great. And he's maybe going to be recruiting some other guys when he is on campus over there in Eugene this weekend. Let's talk about some of those other guys. Let's talk about the storylines that I think we have going into this June 13th official visit weekend. Oregon's playing with a little bit of a lead, especially with 3 guys, and that's where I want to start. 3 of the visitors this weekend are on 3 RPM predicted to land at Oregon. Quarterback Ryder Lyons. We already talked about Messiah Hampton. Don't need to talk about him anymore. Cornerback Devon Benjamin, as well, out of Oaks Christian in California. Let's start first with Ryder Lyons, the quarterback. This recruitment has become so important. Ever since you even go back to what happened with Jaron Kavawi-Sagapulitelli, and then you go to the flip of Jonas Williams, and then you go to missing out on Jared Curtis. They need to get an elite level quarterback. You can't keep striking out. You can't set that precedent that Oregon is always second place. I know the Ducks do a great job in the transfer portal with quarterbacks. I get that, but at some point, they need to develop a quarterback. At some point, they need to win a recruitment. At some point, they need to get the job done. And I think, although Ryder Lyons doesn't look like he's going to be visiting USC in the spring or the summer, there's something maybe scheduled out there in the fall. We'll see what happens with that. But right now, these 2 weeks seem very pivotal. They seem very crucial. And Oregon needs to keep, what we saw last weekend is they are putting all of their chips into the middle of these official visit tables, which shouldn't surprise anybody. It's the summer of Dan, after all. This is kind of what Oregon does. They really excel during this official visit season. But Ryder Lyons, BYU, is the other big contender in this recruitment right now. BYU, I think, can throw around some cash. And we know the connection with the Church of Latter-day Saints. We know that Ryder Lyons is going to be going on a mission, and he's really a 2027 recruit as well. So, this is one that Oregon certainly needs to put a lot of resources into. I'm very curious as to what the timing is going to be coming out of these official visits. This weekend for Oregon, next weekend for BYU, for Ryder Lyons as well. So, it goes without saying how big of a recruitment he is. He is the future of the quarterback position if they can get him to commit to Oregon. But being a 2027 kid, it's kind of there's still a lot of time before he signs on the dotted line. So even if he does commit, I still do think that there is a decent amount of time to go, but we'll see. Hopefully the Duck coaching staff can sell him that they want to invest into him as the future at the quarterback position, the future leader of this Duck offense going forward post Dante Moore. Let's talk about Devon Benjamin. He's been on 3 RPM predicted at Oregon for, I think, a couple of months now, for a while, and I'm very curious to see where the staff stands on him. I talked about at the beginning of the segment the sheer talent and size and length that was on campus from the defensive back position as well. We know what they took last year with those 4 elite players. Where does a guy like Devon Benjamin fit into all of this? If this is a team that can go out and they can get Jet Washington and they can get Brandon Arrington, where that's a corner, that's a safety. Where does someone like Devon really fit in? One thing that I think is very interesting, I've said this before in a previous show, I think that he really fits the role of that slot corner, that nickel, the star position in Oregon's defense. Oregon already has the commitment this cycle from someone as well that I believe could fit into that position as well. Now, Devon Benjamin is really listed as a corner. Xavier Larice is that other guy. He's listed as a safety. He's been committed for a while. I think he was on campus this last weekend or recently, if I'm not mistaken. He is ultra staunch in his commitment, certainly to Oregon. Him and Tristan Phillips are just they're all in. I don't think they're going anywhere, certainly right now. So are they going to take 2 guys that could fit into the star position in this 2026 cycle? Texas, I think Devon Benjamin was on campus at Texas last weekend, and it looks like they are making a significant push. Of course, being in California, USC is also a team that is also very much involved, or wants, I should say, to probably be very much involved in this recruitment as well. But I'm just kind of curious. I'm kind of curious where Devon Benjamin really sits and really stands in all of this. My hunch for the secondary tells me 1 corner, possibly 2 safeties, and a star. That's what it really tells me for this class. Okay, that could get you Brandon Arrington. That could get you Jet Washington. Maybe they pull off an upset with Joey O'Brien. Maybe they get Jyra Edwards, right? And then, or maybe they get 2 stars, like I said, or 2 nickel guys in Devon Benjamin and Xavier Larice. So I'm very curious to see how the plan is all going to come together as these months certainly come forward. Now, second thing, they got a big opportunity to make some big moves on some big boys. A lot of talk around when it comes to the offensive line now has been about Emmanuel Ahinacho, and I put him number 1 in my priority recruitment rankings for a reason. You know who else I put in my top 5? Offensive tackle Kelvin Obot. He is going to be on campus from Fruitland, Idaho, just across the Oregon-Idaho border. I think he's a big one. Oregon always wanted 2 offensive linemen in this class, or I should say like 2 offensive tackles. And now you have Tommy Toffee committing over to Cal. Now I think Kelvin Obot, right? We see some of these guys, the priority continues to step up the ladder. Deuce Gerald's a defensive tackle from the Southeast. I think Oregon, they're in the top 4 for Kelvin Obot. They're sitting in a really good position. I think this official visit is going to go a long way to determine where the Ducks really stand with Obot and if they can get that deal done. Deuce Gerald feels a lot like Tyler Atkinson to me. Guy from the South. Really good player, someone that Oregon wants. We know that they lost Tamahini Tupui on the defensive line. That we know that they've got the 2 Willamette kids that we've talked about before with Tony Cumberland and Viliami Malawa. Having a 3rd defensive lineman in this class, I think, I'm talking about like a defensive tackle type of guy, not necessarily an edge rusher, but somebody like Deuce Gerald's, I think would be big. Now, it's going to be tough. This is another one of those Southeast recruitments that I think is going to be very difficult. But what did we see when you get a guy on campus for an official visit and you show him and you roll out the red carpet and you put all the bells and whistles out there? That can make a difference. That can make an impact. So Deuce Geralds and Tyler Atkinson are guys that I think a lot of people are thinking they're going to be tough pulls. Can they go into the Southeast and do what they did with Naeem Offord with either of these guys? I think these official visits are going to go a long way to really determining what certainly comes out of that as well. Should be a very interesting weekend here on campus in Eugene on this June 13th, really setting the stage for next weekend, which is going to be huge. It is going to be huge to really finish off this official visit season as well. Now, a lot of people out in the Oregon community, considering everything that's happened, whether it's been losing recruits, whether it's been flips, a lot of people out there are maybe concerned about where the Ducks stand with recruiting. I am aware of the trend that is happening with recruiting right now, and obviously, when you're a top-level program and you have the things that have happened at Oregon over the spring, it's not a good look. But folks, recruiting cycles have chapters in them. This is not a short story, right? These are not individual stories. This is a novel. There are many chapters throughout all of this. I am not concerned. Some other people out there might be concerned, but I am not concerned about Oregon Ducks recruiting. I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to set a deadline. Say, if by this date Oregon ain't making moves, okay, maybe your eyebrows and maybe your ears should certainly perk up a little bit as well. Here's maybe why I'm not concerned right now. Folks, I know you look at Cody Green, you look at Jackson Cantwell, you look at Jared Curtis, you look at Caden Dixon Wyatt, you look at Jonas Williams, you look at Tamahini Tapu, you look at Bot Mulatalo, you look at all of these guys, folks, and I get it. I get it 1,000% why you're concerned. But folks, there's still plenty of food left on the table. I get that's a lot of food out there. But there is still plenty of food left on the table. Deep breath, Ted. Here are some names. Tyler Atkinson, Emmanuel Ahinacho, Ryder Lyons, Brandon Arrington, Calvin Russell, Messiah Hampton, Davon Benjamin, Kelvin Obot, Richard Wesley, Jet Washington, Joey O'Brien, Jalen Lott, Deuce Geralds, and maybe, just maybe, a signing day flip of Zion Ely. Folks, there, look at that food. You got stuffing. You got casserole. You got turkey legs. You got a lot there. You look at that class, I listed off a lot of those names. There aren't a lot of names in that group where Oregon isn't a contender. Oregon is bringing as much talent onto campus for official visits as they have maybe in recent years. There is still enough talent out there. There is still enough food on the table for this Oregon football team to eat. And by eating, I mean their third consecutive top 5 class as well. Now, a lot of people concerned about money. Oh my gosh, did Oregon run out of money? Well, no, they didn't run out of money. And Dan Lanning and Marshall did not forget how to recruit either. Like, that's the thing. What, you think these guys just woke up one day and like, well, I don't remember how to recruit anymore. No, these guys know what they're doing. They've done this. They know how to adapt. But here's something that's, I think, worth keeping in mind. We are now in a post-House versus NCAA settlement world, and Kirby Smart said publicly in an interview, you got teams that are paying $20,000, $25,000 a month just to commit. Pay to commit is something that's really been a hot topic this cycle. Like, that stuff isn't going to fly in an NIL clearinghouse type of world. I think Oregon has been operating at a fair market value. They are not willing to overspend these crazy amounts of money that we've heard, not necessarily confirmed, but heard of schools like a Miami or a USC, and schools just an absurd amount of money that's being thrown out there. But they were throwing that amount of money out there because I think that they were trying to beat the deadline. Whereas Oregon's just sitting and waiting, knowing that the House settlement is happening. And when that happens, that's when they can pounce. Everybody's talking about, the playing field is more level and Oregon's not going to be able to spend as much money. I talked about that earlier, why that's maybe not the case to begin with. But now when you have some of these crazy deals that are way above the market value of a guy that's never played college football before, now that you have that, now you bring it down. And I think that's where Oregon can certainly now be a lot more competitive financially and really play a lot more in this fair market value type of world than maybe some things that were happening out there before. I think that there were teams knew that the House versus NCAA settlement was coming. Say, hey, we got to beat it to the punch. We got to find a way to kind of sneak some things in, certainly before that. And we got some big commitments coming, some big commitment dates in line with the fireworks, in line with the hot dogs, in line with the baked beans, in line with the wavy chips, and that being the 4th of July. Jalen Lott, wide receivers on 4th of July, Brandon Arrington, Jair Edwards, Calvin Russell coming up on July 5th. So when is my recruiting concern deadline? Right after that, July 6th. July 6th. If players have committed that are Oregon targets that have maybe been on campus for official visits, if they have committed to other schools by July 6th, and Oregon is losing out on a lot of guys that have been on campus for official visits, then that's when I'll start to be concerned. Because it would be breaking the norm. I put out a tweet a month or so ago, is that like 80 to 85%, maybe it was upwards of 90% of the commits from last year's class happened after May, after the month of June, right? So if a lot of these players that Oregon brings on campus do not end up becoming Ducks, it would be breaking the norm. That's what I've always focused on, is the historical aspect of this, right? Oregon doesn't get it done in the spring. They get it done in the summer. They get it done going into the fall, and they close on signing day. That has been the norm with Dan Lanning. If the norm breaks, then I think that can be cause for concern. So talk to me on July 6th, right? The fireworks smoke will be dissipated by then. I think we'll maybe have digested all of our hot dogs and our baked beans and all of our 4th of July patriotic pride certainly by then. If you're talking to me and a lot of those guys that I mentioned at the beginning of this segment are committed elsewhere, then maybe we can talk about it. But until then, hey, let's chill out. Let's enjoy the ride. Dan and Marshall certainly still know what they're doing. Great edition, man. This was a TSOW where I was fired up. I was pumped up. Hey, we bring the passion. I bring the passion here on TSOW. All right, that wraps up this edition of That Show Out West. So until next time, I'm Ted LaRue. This has been That Show Out West.